Yeah, I think we're on. Yeah, it's streaming now. Yep. I don't know how I can't hear the audio, Armin. Yeah. Oh, you do. That's good. Well, I think Renzo's saying. Oh yeah. Good morning, comrades. Hi, Renzo. Okay.
This is
And and only Armin can see the live chat, right?
no. You could,
Huh?
you could send a link to.
I don't need to see it if well, it's up to you. I'll let you drive that ship.
Yeah, I'll send you the link right afterwards.
All right, our audio is almost ready. Just 1 second. Let people know that I'm fixing something. Well,
All right, guys. Yeah, we're just about to come on. Armin's just fixing something,
okay, it's fixed. Go ahead.
and it's fixed. All right. You good? Everybody ready?
Yeah,
You good?
ready.
Anybody have to go pee or no? No.
Too late.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. If you noticed, then I apologize for my voice right now. I feel like I'm coming down with something. Hopefully it's nothing serious, and I'll be around for the next few episodes, to the chagrin of many of you. But in any case, today we're going to, as you saw in the description, we have the filmmaker behind the new movie, Islam and the Future of Tolerance, which is based on the book of the same title, which many of you know was a published dialogue between Sam Harris and Maajid Nawaz, both of whom have been on this podcast before. And with us, we have the director of the movie, Jay Shapiro. Jay, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and the salute's not going to work. It's audio. It works for the people watching it on video.
For our patrons, yeah.
For them,
Yeah.
I salute
So
you.
first of all, I want to say congratulations on the movie. I know the movie's like charting all over the place on
Thanks.
iTunes and other places, and it's actually rising. Are you surprised by the response? Is this something you were expecting?
I think I am surprised by it. I didn't have a ton of expectations. I'm pleasantly surprised. I had no idea. I mean, it's clear from all of the energy in a lot of these conversations that the audience is way bigger than anybody sort of initially first expected on kind of any of these intellectual discourses. But who knows how deep that pool really goes. I have no idea who's watching it also, like now. So that's kind of interesting and exciting. It's brand new. It's only been out, 2 days now. So it could just be all the chamber right now, and that's just way bigger. I have no idea. But it's great. Yeah.
So how did it start? I know that but I knew about this because we also I'm in the movie towards the end too, right? So, but how did the whole project start? Why did you? I mean, there was a book out. It's fairly short. It's readable. You can kind of read it in a couple of hours if you're a slow reader. But why decide to put it in a movie format or to explore it in the visual way? As a filmmaker, what added value did you think that would bring?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, I was obviously, it goes without saying, personally loved the book and was rather influenced by it and affected by it. I thought every conversation that I personally had in my own life, or even public conversations I was having, just got sharper and better with more clarity. Felt like I was being understood better, and just organized the thoughts in my own head after onboarding a lot of the language from the book. So I just wanted to amplify that to new audiences, explore some ideas in the visual space, see if they would hit differently. And then I think we were talking about it before, but some people just don't read, and there's always new audiences who would just prefer to sit down for 90 minutes and get introduced to it that way. To bring it to new audiences, and then also just to put a cinematic kind of veneer on the conversation or any of these conversations, to take it out of sort of the no offense to what we're doing here, but sort of like the webcam version of atheism on YouTube, and really put it in theaters and really put it to new audiences that we know desperately need it, that maybe don't take this other kind of conversation seriously. So literally our first hit that we got with our PR company, whether they aired or not, was with MSNBC's Morning Joe, which should air the week of the 24th. That's a show and an audience that I think really wouldn't touch this film or this book directly, but they get a press release with this great distributor on it, and it looks like a real film because it is one, and it's hopefully a signal that the water's fine. You could jump into this conversation. It's there's nothing to be afraid of here. So hopefully that this treatment of it is a tool for people like yourselves and maybe a lot of your listeners who are very aware of this conversation. The film, if you learn something new, that's great. You might not learn anything new, but I hope it's a tool for all of us who are familiar with it to use to help sort of, spread the conversation or introduce people to it, or just, have it as a document to keep around. But yeah, I think sometimes we overestimate just how many people are even aware of any of this conversations.
Yeah. So before we move on, let's start with just the basics. If you can just explain to those who may not be familiar,
sure,
as we're showing, just really quickly what the movie's about, and if we can just kind of talk about that really, really quickly.
Yeah. So the movie briefly is a documentary that follows the collaboration between Sam Harris and Maajid Nawaz. So, if for people who don't know, Sam is a prominent atheist philosopher, started writing and became a public intellectual right after 9/11. He tells the story in the film. He gives sort of a crash course of his career with a book called The End of Faith. It was part of the initial wave of the new atheist movement of the post 9/11 conversation. Meanwhile, Maajid was literally in a prison in Egypt because he was a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir as a top recruiter for them. Grew up in England and faced a lot of racism growing up and was going through a certain identity crisis and fell in with this group and was quite good at what he was doing of recruiting people towards the ends of trying to establish a global Islamic caliphate or a Middle East Islamic caliphate through means of instigating coups and political upheavals rather than blowing people up. Eventually, he made his way out of that through an intellectual journey that started really in prison, and by the time he got out of prison, began to advocate for reform within Islam. He and Sam clashed.
And he was in prison in an Egyptian prison for 5 years, right?
Yeah, 4 years, I think, but yeah,
4 years,
four and change. So he and Sam initially clashed. The very first time they met was at a debate here in New York, where I am, which is still online. It's a great debate. It's called From Intelligence Squared. The motion that night was Islam is a religion of peace, and he was debating for the motion along with a woman named Zeba Khan. On the opposing side of the motion was Ayaan Hirsi Ali and Douglas Murray. It's worth a watch. It's still online. Sam and Maajid clash at this restaurant after they were having sort of just a dinner for special guests and participants. Sam was there, and they clash. We go through the story in the film where Sam sort of challenges the position that Maajid took on stage, and it did not go well. Maajid was, are you calling me a liar? And they get into sort of this pissing match and almost fight if you believe Ayaan's version of it, and that's it. And then they walk away from each other. Little trivia fact: Maajid also met his wife that night, so the night was very eventful for Maajid for a lot of reasons. And also, little known fact: she voted for Ayaan's side in the debate. So. Anyway,
who voted for Ayaan's? Oh, his
Maajid's
Rachel, Maajid's wife.
Yeah. Anyway, so 4 years later, in the meantime, Sam continues to have frustrating conversations about this particular topic publicly, and out of that frustration, of feeling like he's being misunderstood and being called a bigot or an Islamophobe or whatever, reaches out to Maajid again. So 4 years later, has this phone call, which he initially was just intending to be a blog post. This is even before he started his podcast. And it ended up being 2 phone calls, actually, and they were so productive and so interesting. It started sort of as an argument, moves towards sort of a conversation. At the end is really a collaboration of ideas that they just sort of published the phone call. They cleaned it up a little bit and just published it as the book that you referenced. And that is the film. So we use that original phone call, which we have as sort of the skeleton to build. And we do these in-depth interviews with both men and really flesh out a lot of their arguments and just put it in that medium. And there you go. You can watch it on all the VOD platforms.
I know. By the way, the movie is awesome. You guys should go watch it. What's the link?
I mean, it's on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, all the VOD services.
But can I be a little bit critical? And I know this is kind of mean.
You can be very critical,
Okay.
yeah.
So, given that this whole movie is about reform, one thing I think was missing was any mention of, and maybe I missed it, the ex-Muslim movement, and as an alternative to reform. And given that the main advocate for reform, Maajid, he himself in his book Radical, he mentions the ex-Muslim movement and his support for the ex-Muslim movement. I was a little bit sad to see that, given that we're talking about Islam and how we can fix the situation and whether reform is possible or not was the main topic of the movie. This whole idea, there's some other people that have a different view, maybe even like for 5 seconds, or wasn't mentioned somewhere. Like,
yeah, I think like there's two main ways to answer that. One is, of course, like, it's hopeless that we were going to make a comprehensive film about something as big and sloppy as that. So there is a narrow story of just this particular conversation. So, okay, there's a lot of ways to answer it. Another way to answer it is, as the filmmaker, I'm not beholden to everything that either man says in the film or woman in the film and any of the voices we have. There's things I disagree with Maajid. There's things I disagree with Sam. I hope the film plays as an invitation to continue the conversation, and that particular point is, of course, like a monumental part of the conversation that needs to be told. The idea of, is Maajid wasting his time, is a totally legit conversation to have. And I hope that's also invited in there. And I think Maajid would also, there's moments in the film, and maybe this is an advantage of the visual of it, is you could see Majid's face when he says a lot of this stuff. One of my favorite parts of the film is when he goes through the what he calls intellectual gymnastics of reinterpreting this thing with cutting the hands or whatever.
Yeah.
He sort of laughs at himself.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to seeing his face there and seeing the emotion of like, listen, I know how this sounds, and I know what a lot of you think about what I'm saying. And then he makes this plea, and you could disagree with the plea, and you could listen to the plea. It sort of is what it is. I think like the best defense of Maajid, if I would give it to you now, Armin, is Maajid is trying to be the voice that he didn't hear when he was 15. Take that or leave that. You could leave it. I could see what your face, but just if you do the thought experiment, and maybe he's wrong. No. If you do the thought experiment of he's this 15-year-old or teenager running down the streets away from Combat 18 and neo-Nazis and going through whatever identity crisis he's going through, and he turns the corner, and there's Sam Harris talking about atheism, and there's the Hizb ut-Tahrir guy talking about this version of things. In his mind, he wishes if he could go in a time machine and be himself, being like, hey, young Maajid, come this way. Let me show you a way that you can.
He's presenting the dialogue that he thinks that would have been effective if he'd heard it at the time.
I think that's probably something we always do psychologically. I think in some ways, Armin, we're always doing this in some ways. I think this is how we live psychologically as humans. When we realize we're smarter today than we were 3 days ago, it's like, oh, let me try to be, I wish I could go back in time now and tell myself something. Armin, if you could go back in time now and meet your 12-year-old self, and convince yourself of what you're doing now, you would do the same thing. I think again, I'm not saying Maajid's right. I'm just trying to give the best defense on a psychological, personal level of his project.
Right.
Take it or leave.
No, first of all, I know Maajid welcomes disagreements. Okay, so
yeah.
Nobody denies that. And I also don't think that this is. I don't agree that Maajid is wasting his time. Just because you disagree with him on one thing doesn't mean that the work he's doing is not valuable. Like what most reformist Muslims are people that are fighting for secularism, which we're fighting for, they're fighting for women's rights, which we're fighting for. They're fighting for democracy. They're fighting for peace. They're fighting for gay rights. They're fighting for transgender rights. And those are all the other things that we fight for. And when it comes to those things, not only do we see them as allies, we see them as allies that we need so much, that they have so much, that we are so lucky that they're even paying any attention to any of these, but given the audience that they have. Like, The work that they're doing is valuable, and we are thankful for it. But disagreeing with them on some of the things that they say does not mean we're not thankful for all the other work that they do. If I say all the work that you're doing is valuable and we need it, but it has nothing to do with Islam, that does not mean that the work that you're doing is not valuable. We need the work that you're doing. You're fighting against so much injustice. You're fighting for free speech. All of that is valuable, and we need that, and we thank you for doing that. I just disagree with people calling it Islamic reform. That's one thing that I just wanted to put out there. Disagreeing doesn't mean not being thankful for valuable work. Another thing is that you're saying that I completely disagree that this is the voice that what he's saying is what he wanted to hear, or would be the most useful for him to hear, because we know what voice changed his mind. Because, I mean, we read this book, right? The Radical, right? We know that it wasn't Islam that changed his mind. It was ideas other than Islam. It was a challenge of Islam that changed Majid's mind. So all I'm saying is that we want to prescribe the same medicine to people that are radicals that brought Majid out of his radical views, which was not Islam.
When he was 15, or when he was a teenager before he was, fully in it, isn't that a different character that you're trying to intervene with?
So you're saying they're less? Yeah, they might. The thing is that we're going for the most logical part. Are you saying that people that are less logical, we have to use less logical reasoning with them? I don't think so. I think on average, more like what are you suggesting? Like different arguments work for different ages?
So let me actually. This is a good time to bring up.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Jay. Go ahead and answer. I actually thought.
Yeah, I don't think it's ages. I think what you said was totally accurate there, and a good reading for Maajid. But the desire that Maajid had, again, I hate speaking for him here. He's like, I don't.
Yeah, we know that this is your best understanding, not exactly. It might be. It might not.
Let me just I'll just caveat and bracket everything I'm saying. But the desire that someone like Maajid would be feeling to shroud themselves in an identity for very complicated reasons of feeling like an outsider in their own community, or just general revenge against these dudes who was chasing him. Whatever he was feeling there, the challenges. I don't know if they would hit if you're giving challenges to Islam before he fully shrouds himself in it. I just don't know if they would hit. And again, I have no idea, and Maajid probably doesn't know either.
Well, we know from doing what we do at the as being ex-Muslims and advocating not for changing Islam but against Islam. We know it works. We know it works, and we have so many people to show that it works, right?
Yeah. So I wanted to take this and move it into the article that you wrote.
Actually, that's a very good transition.
So for Arc Digital, and I think that this kind of helps clarify, and I really, really like this, Jay. Thanks. I mean, I think you, for a lot of the conversations we've had in this podcast, this really, really categorizes people's approach to this topic in a really good way. So you have talked about how there are different mindsets. So the first mindset, and correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, I'm just going to sort of introduce it really quickly and then let you take it from there. The first one is a philosophical mindset. And the philosophical mindset is basically concerned with discovering what is true, just uncovering the truth. Now, it may not be convenient truth, may not be inconvenient truth, but it would just be something that's true. It may not be necessarily moral, but it's dispassionate, and it's just, I just want to figure out what the reality is. And the second mindset is a political mindset, which talks about what you think is helpful. Like, okay, what you're saying may be true, but is this going to help change minds? Is it going to help, make a difference on a larger scale when you're speaking to people? And then the third one you talk about is a psychological mindset, which is more of, I guess, what I got from it is a sort of an observer mindset, where they're just kind of looking at all of these different minds working and conversations happening. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the psychological is well, it's the mindset where the effort is to discover how minds work.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're not the first two are people that are trying to make a change, and the third one is just an observer.
No, you talk in the article about the I was going to say intersectionality.
It works.
Right.
There's an overlap, I think, is the word that I was using. I think I used the word once, actually. Yeah.
But so what I'm saying is, you kind of seem to characterize Sam Harris, according to you, as having a philosophical mindset, just concerned with discovering what's true and just talking about what's real and what's not, and with Maajid presumably having a more sort of political mindset that, okay, we can talk about the truth, but let's see what's really going to work. How can we really make a change among people? That's going to be helpful. So, and you said you align more with the philosophical mindset, but
I mean, I just have a natural tendency towards it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
So what do you think that, because to me, this movie...
Can I quickly say something about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because the thing is, okay, so we have a group of people that care about what's true, and there are another group of people that care about what works, what changed people's minds, right?
I should probably change it to like the political mindset is concerned with discovering what is effective.
But the truth is the most effective, isn't it?
Okay, well, so let's. I mean, I think yes, but how do you politically express it? I mean, if you think the truth, what is true and what is effective are an entire overlap, I think you're not doing enough of the negotiation of the psychological of how minds work.
But it's actually not true, Armin. The truth isn't the most...
No, that's not what I said. It's not okay. If these are two circles, I didn't say they're completely aligned, but I think the overlap is so much that it's just going for the truth is the most effective way of.
I don't think
topics there is, but it depends, and of course it changes when the topic changes. These shift, and sometimes people argue that they never overlap, and that's a problem. I disagree with you. That
but the thing is that, and also think it also matters if we're looking about short term or long term, because useful lies might help short term, and you taking advantage of gullible people for a greater good is not a good idea, is not a good investment in the long run. So
let me try to, because I think also weaving in the psychological, and I pay lip service to it maybe too briefly in that article, but it's really, really important, and it's where so much of this gets tripped up, because someone who's worrying about discovering how minds work, that can be so. In the philosophical mindset, and someone like Sam makes the argument all the time, and maybe yourself, Armin, of people are telling us exactly why they're flying planes into a building or doing this thing or that, and so we should believe them. Like, they're telling us what they believe in. I'm not a mind reader, so I take it at their word and I believe them. Okay, that's very comfortable. A psychologist and a psychological mindset comes along and says, well, you know what, I'm actually sort of a mind reader, and so it's not so simple, because people don't always say exactly what they mean, and the motivations are actually very complicated. I think I wrote in the article, we're just incredibly complex post hoc rationalization machines. John Haidt uses that wonderful analogy of the elephant and the rider, of we're really good at being the rider on the elephant and convincing ourselves we told the elephant which way to go in the first place, but we're really good at, it's going this way and this is the way it meant to go all along. But there are, so in this, what's really, really delicate here is there are people in the psychological mindset who have less than genuine motivations here, because you can use that mindset to dismiss all religious motivation. We've seen that happen. People who say, people don't ever really believe that at all, and you're just wasting your time. But there are, and we have to be able to talk about and discover how minds work and fold that into your analysis. So just to answer and give you a specific answer about what you said, I'll give you an example of it. It's actually a friend of mine. I was talking to her mom about all of this while I was making the film, and she was a big Obama fan. And I was trying to introduce some of these concepts, and I used the term you were sort of just getting at there, but I used the term, and I was trying to be careful, of a noble lie. In particular, this has nothing to do with Islam trope when something happens, and I referenced it as a noble lie. Just use that word. And I thought I was being careful. But, what's that? Yeah, sure. But literally just her hearing the word lie associated with someone who she had this emotional attachment to in Barack Obama kind of triggered her there, for lack of a better word, but set her off in a path where it really took me, 45 minutes of a failed conversation to pull that back and parse the word in a million other different ways that I meant the same exact thing. But doing the careful work and the analysis of, okay, why that word lie psychologically set her off there. I mean, that's how minds work. Again, I eventually got her to see what I was saying, but the word lie was not going to fly for her. And it wasn't going to be helpful. Okay, well, it wasn't going to be helpful or effective for me to use that word to get there. So, I had to use a whole other dictionary and use all the linguistics tools that I had to get there. But
then you went into the political mindset, right?
No.
What's that?
Then you go into the political mindset.
I was certainly operating in the political mindset because I wanted to mean this was someone who I cared about, seeing some of what I was saying and not think I was a bigot and actually maybe do something about it and change her mind a little bit. Yeah, if you want to say it's a lie and that's in the truth, you're operating in the philosophical there.
I think a lot of us have
attack there. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think a lot of us have we harbor all of them, because when I was reading it, okay, but again, I can't stress how much I love your article.
Where can people find the article?
I'll put a link to it.
Yeah.
But for people that are not going to go check the description, what to search for?
Yeah, I mean, there's a link on my YouTube page or on my Twitter page. It's Arc Media.
It's arcdigital.media. So if you go to arcdigital.media, and you just search for Jay Shapiro, I think you'll find the article. But in any case, the reason I wish that I guess there were some elements of this in the film, but even though it wasn't as sort of clearly laid out as in the article. But the reason I like it is because I was thinking of what I am, right? In that, and then my immediate instinct was to think, okay, psychological. But then I realized that I'm probably more. I couldn't really decide, because the way that I do it is I come up with, personally, I'm just concerned with what I think is true, right? So I'll come up with what I think is true and use the philosophical mindset to get there. And then the psychological will kick in. I'm like, okay, I think that this is true, but why don't so many other people think this way? Well, let's look at their history. Let's look at how minds work. Let's look at how indoctrination works. Let's look at how, superstition and financial insecurity and economic and political insecurity work, and why people hold on to certain myths for their own comfort, or how people compartmentalize their brains, like Francis Collins, who when he does with evolution and his religious beliefs and so on. And then you look into that and you read it, and I'm totally fascinated by that, how people, like the illusory lie and all that. And then once I go through philosophical to psychological, and then the political one kicks in. I'm like, okay, so now when I write this down, I'm talking to Muslim kids in, say, Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, where I grew up. I'll tap into the way my mind worked then, and then how other people think over there. How can I say what I believe to be true? All right, what my philosophical mind believes to be true, in a way that's effective, and that's where the political mindset kicks in. So
I have to interrupt.
No, but does that make sense?
No, it doesn't. Because it's all okay. So
well, let Jay answer.
No, but I wanted to. Okay, I really wanted to say this. Okay, Jay, may I interrupt for a second?
No, but can you just answer? Does that make sense? Like in the.
You were describing your personal. I think I'm curious about that. How people think how they do their own dance through it, but yes, I think.
No, it doesn't make sense. Can I answer?
Okay, tell me what.
Because you guys are talking about whether the truth matters or a different method, but no,
that's not what we're saying. That's not. No.
Wait, can I say something?
I want to hear Armin's point.
Okay, so we're talking about whether something is true or not. The delivery method is a different topic, but what we don't negotiate on, what we don't give into, is to say anything other than what is true. When we all of a sudden decide, like, okay, now what's the best way to communicate this?
Yes.
The realm that we're not going to go to is whether lying is more effective.
I agree with that.
We could stay within the borders of truth.
I agree with that.
And then decide what is the best way to communicate this with people.
Let me see if I can clean it up a little bit for you.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Because I agree with you. The word, I think people are oftentimes way too lazy when they say we have to lie, or maybe always lazy when they say we have to lie to communicate the truth. this is
uncreative. Yeah.
uncreative, lazy, however we want to put it. So I'm with you, Armin. Like I'm not advocating that we lie about things. But all right, so we can bring in a lot of contentious topics here because they all relate. But Charles Murray, is it true that race and IQ correlate? Like, of course it is. And of course, like, you just think about the evolution and like that, of course, populations group together. And of course, genetics, likely has an influence over intelligence and or intelligence. And of course, populations tend to group over racial lines. Like, these are all things that are, of course, true. If you're just going to go out and say that, it's there's a politically dangerous way to communicate that truth, and there's a politically compassionate way or effective way to communicate that truth. I mean, I don't think that's
the truth.
And
you're not compromising on the truth, though.
Yes,
yeah,
not compromising on the truth, but saying, there's a lot of ways to say it. Especially, here's I want to give you an answer that I gave. Maybe this will answer it. Actually, I want to give you an answer that I gave in the Q&A in Los Angeles, because someone asked about free speech, and I feel like in a lot of these conversations, there's an attraction towards free speech absolutism and this like almost devotion to it. And legally, I agree with it. Legally, I'm a free speech absolutist. I think Sam actually responded that same way when I was on stage. But if you think about these things just for 5 seconds longer, I've been doing this thought experiment, and I just want to throw it at you, Armin, because I think it gets to this point. If you have a room of 100 people and you're an event planner, and somebody's going to come up and give a talk about pedophile sex rings at a pizza parlor outside of Washington, D.C., just for a crazy example that we've never heard before. And you've done all the psychological research. Let's say you have all the access to all the information of all 100 people in the room, and they're pretty dumb and they're pretty gullible and pretty uneducated. Let's say half of them you have a great reason to believe are likely to believe this story when it's told. And then just half of them are likely to take it really seriously and want to do something about it. And half of them actually will do something about it. And then half of them have weapons. You're literally down to like 1 or 2 people in the entire room. But you're an event planner, and it's a moral dilemma of, do you allow this speech to go on, and you're putting real lives in real danger. Now, there's also a risk to not allowing speech, and we know that. So it's not a simple like, oh, then I guess we'll never allow free speech and you need to deplatform people. But it's a constant negotiation of, are you being effective? Are you being what's politically effective here and what's politically compassionate to do? And then the only thing I just want to add to it is the impetus of that, because as I always say, like all good moral dilemmas, the impetus should be to design a world where we're never in it because they're awful. The work we should be doing, and I know you're doing it, which is great, is to try to get less and less of those audiences to actually exist, because we want to live in a world where people are immune to bullshit ideas, and you just let the guy speak, and it just doesn't go anywhere because everyone can see right through it and no one does anything about it. But if we don't live in that world, we have to think about how to do these things politically. So when Barack Obama says this has nothing to do with Islam, we know or think we've done the calculus that it's a bad idea, just because the risk of doing that we think is actually worse than the risk of saying it and having someone misinterpret it, which I obviously agree with. But that's the dance of the political mind, and I think it's not so easy to just say, like, just speak the truth however the hell it comes out of your mouth. It could be irresponsible.
Well, I mean, someone was also saying that. I want
to respond to that. He was throwing it at me. This is exactly why I think the political and the philosophical mindsets should be the same person, because in a
perfect world they would be. Yeah.
No. In this world, not in a perfect world, because this example that you're giving me is kind of similar to the example that people give, like, Armin, my grandma, she's Muslim or she's Christian, she doesn't hurt anybody, or a child that is dying, like she's asking, oh, am I gonna go to heaven to see my parents? Are you gonna go to them and tell them, like, no, that you're gonna die and that's it? Like, so these are the anecdotal, like, very specific examples. Of course, you could come up with very specific examples for every solution, even good solutions, bad solutions, the best solutions. No, there's no solution that is going to work in every single scenario. And of course, every time you could come up with very specific scenarios that the solution that you're offering could do way more harm than good. But if you want to be political and philosophical at the same time, the truth is that this method works way better than almost everything else, even with the very specific examples that you could find that is actually going to be very harmful, right? Like if what I'm the claim is very, here's the claim, and it's not an extraordinary claim. The claim that I'm making here is that if you don't lie to people, if you're more honest with people, if you spread truth rather than trying to figure out which lies work better, on average that's better for our civilization, for everybody, right? But when it comes to free speech, of course I could come up with very specific examples. When it comes to religion, yeah, if a child is dying, his 4-year-old is dying, like, hey, I'm gonna die, go see my mom, I'm not gonna just like last minute, why would I, like, yes, that's a very specific example that I'm not gonna tell the kid that there's no God, there's no heaven. Yes, that your specific example for free speech might be a very specific example why maybe, like, in that very specific example it's gonna do more harm. But we know on average free speech is way better. Like, we're not going to come up with a specific rule for every specific situation. That's impractical.
So I find that uncreative because it's like an on average. I think we do need to. Why not parse it a little more? I mean, what do you respond with to people who say, like, oh, my grandmother?
Vast majority.
Wait, sorry, Jay. What was it? What would you respond to with what?
I mean, I was curious with, like, people come at you with, my grandmother's not doing any harm. You're going to tell her there's no heaven or something. Yeah.
I'm not going to talk to your grandma if she doesn't want to be talked to, right? Like, so what we're saying.
But why not? But why not?
Am I going to go force because she doesn't want to? If she's interested, I'm not going to deny her or not. Like, if she's interested in our content, she could come. So
I'm saying if she asks him directly if she wants to talk, then he would be honest. You're saying that you would tell her.
But I'm not gonna go. I'm not gonna go chasing your grandma, telling her to leave her religion. Of course not. But what I'm saying is that what we're looking at what works, right? And what works, like on average, is to spread more of what is true rather than be like, hey, this is. Can I take this bullshit and replace it with a different brand of bullshit, right? We are just broadcasting our content. Everybody's just broadcasting our content, and we can see on which tactics work better. And obviously, if you come up with specific examples, that's not that those like 1% or 2% or 5% shouldn't really affect the strategies that are working the best.
No, but even if they're 1 or 2%, it depends on the scale too, right? So the scale is, for instance, if you're a politician or if you're an activist who has a certain kind of agenda, then often you're going to, like, you look at the Saudi Arabia thing. Thankfully, the U.S. Senate voted today, actually, as of this recording, to withdraw support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen. But anyway, but we've talked about that a lot here.
Okay.
So the problem is the U.S. government often, if you're a politician, even a guy like Barack Obama, who was friends with Bill Ayers, and he was like the leftist of the left. He was a radical leftist guy when he was younger. Something happened to him in the White House when the first, I guess, closed-door briefing or whatever it was, his daily intelligence briefing, where his foreign policy became a lot like Bush Sr. And he came out, and a lot of the things that I think every president goes in saying we're going to do something about Saudi Arabia, including Trump, including Obama, once they get in, then they realize, well, if I was writing an op-ed, then I could be very truthful about how shitty Saudi Arabia is. But if I'm a politician and I go out and I say, okay, well, screw you, Saudi Arabia, we're just cutting off whatever with them, then our unemployment's going to go up, our oil, gas price is going to rise, our economy is going to tank, and long term, eventually there'll be some kind of equilibrium, but in the short term, it's going to be very, very damaging to a lot of people. So that's, I think, one place where if you're a politician, very, very, very few politicians, even people who are very, very far left, have found it very difficult to be completely truthful on those issues. So I think that
okay, even if you want to be strategic, not saying something is different than lying to people.
Do you think?
But I think
there's a point in the film, just to like bring it to a specific point in the film, when Sam reassesses the line that he wrote in the End of Faith when he wrote "We are at war with Islam." This seems to go to your point of, like, he says, and I agree with him there, of, okay, even if he's a philosophical mindset, he's writing a book for public consumption. So it's sort of a cop out to say, like, I'm not a diplomat and I'm just doing this. People are going to read it and it has consequences. So he writes that line and he says, of course, he wrote 30 other lines around it that parse it in different ways. But then he says, after onboarding this language from Maajid, that, you know, it's easy to see how he would be misunderstood from that line. It's easy to see that. And while he hasn't changed what he meant, he has better linguistic tools, or maybe sharper tools, in order to make that same point in a way that carries much less of a risk to be misunderstood. Maybe you don't like the tools in the Islamism and the jihadism.
Misunderstood by people that don't matter, though. Who are we trying to reach? The people that we're trying to reach are the people.
Wait a second. I think the people that would misunderstand that are people that should be, I mean, the people who respond to the word "we are at war with Islam" or the sentence "we are at war with Islam," that matter are the should-be allies on the left who get shut down by that line, where they misunderstand it in a way of, this is just bigotry, I'm closing the book and I'm shutting this guy out. Or far righties who say, oh yeah, that's what I thought.
We're missing the main people, which are the Muslims. The people, the main. If we're fighting Islam, which we are.
Wait. So yes, the film is not about Islam. This is like a big thing that also, like you said earlier, the film is actually about the subtitle for me and why I made the film, and I think for who it's most effective for. This might be.
I think the film is about dialogue.
Wait, what's
the film is, yeah.
I
mean, yes, I'll go through. What they happened to clash about was Islam, and of course, I know that's your bailiwick and that's where you want to be, and I know you have disagreements there. I think and I hope the main audience for this film, and I'm fully aware of it, is likely not Muslims. It's likely the people that you just said don't matter, and I think they do matter, but we could disagree about that. But I think it's about the future of Islam. It's the future of tolerance, rather than Islam, the first word. I hope it's about talking about what it means to be a liberal in a quote-unquote tolerant society and in a very complex multicultural world with all of these different ideas banging against each other. Islam happens to be this amazing test case that puts pressure on all of that, but this is not a film about the reformation of Islam.
No. Forget Islam. We're talking we're talking about dialogue, and instead of calling it left, right, and Muslims, what I'm going to talk about is the people that we're trying to read. Like, there's an idea that we're trying to fight, and there are the people that are holding those ideas. And when it comes to fighting that ideas, those are the people that matter, whatever that idea is, Islam or whatever. And then there are people. Forget the left. And there are some people that don't care about what you're saying. They're just hell-bent on just misrepresenting everything you want to say. And whatever you say, whatever dance you dance, and whatever you try to, whatever you do to try to clarify yourself, they don't give a shit. They're going to misrepresent whatever you have to say. The thing is that you have to go around these people and go directly talk to the people that, I'm not saying they don't matter, because these people that are doing this have their own bad ideas that you have to target and a different dialogue. But in this dialogue that you're having, the target are the people that are holding the bad ideas that you're fighting, right? And when it comes to the people that you're fighting, the more direct you are, the more honest you are, and the less dances that you do, the more of an audience that you have. And I've seen this and I've experienced this. Okay, a lot of people have warned me about the things that I do and the things that I say, and told me that I'm going to lose an audience. The people, oh, Armin, you're trying to reach the Muslim. This is going to lose you an audience. And every time they were wrong. Every time I managed to get to way more Muslims. In this specific example, it could be anything else. Because of the so-called extreme things that they say I said, or the extreme, like I burned the fucking Quran and I recorded it and I put it on YouTube. You know how difficult it used to be for me to get Muslims to come and talk to me, and how much easier it was after I actually burned the Quran? So the exact same things that they told me that it's going to lose me an audience is actually give me a bigger audience of the people that I wanted to talk to.
Yeah, I don't think that addressed my answer at all.
What was okay? How did I not answer?
Go ahead, Jay.
No, I mean, I was, because again, you're talking about Muslims, and I think you said that Islam is the target here, and that's like
any dialogue. Any dialogue.
So who do you? Yeah, like who do you think the target of that holds the bad ideas that you want me to stop lying to?
No,
is
you
here.
did. I'm not criticizing what you're doing. What you did is amazing. I love the movie. I'm criticizing some of the ideas.
The reformist
Yeah,
thing that you're going
some of the methods that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not.
No,
I'm
some
not,
of them.
I'm not Maajid. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
some of the methods that are presented
I think
in the movie.
he's talking about the political mindset
No,
aspect.
I'm talking about some of the methods presented in your movie, which your movie did a great job presenting. I disagree with some of them. I don't. The movie itself is amazing.
Shift your
Yeah.
Table the reform thing. Table the reform atheism tug of war for a minute. As far as the question goes, is it effective at changing Muslims' minds? Table that, because I'm agnostic with that too, and I frankly probably agree with you.
All right.
But is that change the target does from the question on the table of does that change Muslims' minds to does that dialogue introduce or make a space for non-Muslim, the leftists in the West and would-be alt-righters in the West or wherever else to join the conversation and hopefully clear some space? And do you think that matters? I know that's...
Oh, no. Okay, so if the target is the people that think that we shouldn't have conversations, the people that are for deplatforming, for people that are against dialogues like this, right? This is why I'm not being critical of the movie, because with that target, your movie reaches that target audience, and whatever disagreement I might have with Maajid, which by the way, I hope this doesn't come across because I'm a big fan of Maajid. Okay, just with disagreements doesn't mean that I'm
very well versed since making this film with this particular tug of war. And like I said, I probably agree with you if that's the target on the. You should also know before you answer. I met with Maajid and before we filmed a frame of this, and when Maajid and I talked openly about like what do we want the film to accomplish and who was the target, and the first answer was always the left in the West,
right,
and would be alt-righters who maybe a lot of them have now gone that direction. It was always less targeted.
So that's
let me
okay. So finish what you're saying, and then I gotta say something.
No, because I didn't answer what he said. So when it comes to targeting Muslims, right? And changing their minds, I think the reform movement fails significantly. Okay. With regards to the movie that you just made, when it comes to targeting people that on the not. By the way, let's not generalize the left. There's so many people on the left that are
the regressive left. Or
yeah,
whatever,
there's so many people on the left that are not like this and are yeah. So so when it comes to some problematic views from the left, this movie does wonders, right? Because this is exactly what we're addressing. Exactly, the claim here is not like whether Islam is true or not. The claim here is whether dialogue works or not. Can we have friendly discussions with people that we passionately disagree with? And is that a useful thing to do? And again, the interesting thing about this movie is that it goes directly to that. It doesn't go like, hey, maybe it works, it doesn't work. Like, no, this is the claim, and we're saying, and we're tackling the bad idea that we should censor some conversations.
And right? then I'll let Ali respond, because I know we're shutting his mouth. But also presents a voice that is not denying that there is a specific problem and a specific challenge in Islam. Whether you agree with his solution or not, that initial step, like the fact that this film is with Sam and Maajid and not Sam and Reza Aslan is a big deal.
Right.
That you have a dialogue that's not just championing dialogue, as you said, but specifically to your point, if it is effective for, okay, you don't want to use the word left, but for this group of people who are afraid of this dialogue, don't know how to have this dialogue, think it's inherently racist, all those things that we know are maybe well-intentioned but just harmful, having them introduced to the dialogue with somebody who is not denying the problem, I know you disagree with his solution, but not denying the problem is a huge step. And if you call that my political mind and it's a political film that's trying to achieve that, then I disagree. Let's let Ali say something.
No, but just one sentence, one quick sentence.
Okay, Armin, last
part
one.
of
Actually, Jay's gonna get the last one.
Part of this dialogue is also to openly disagree with the views in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
That's true. Now, Ali.
Yeah, and I think
agree with both of them too. So yeah.
it is a testament to your movie, and because what you wanted to do with this movie is start up conversations, I guess, like this, right? So the fact that
absolutely,
I actually think this is great. Like it's really the fact that it is even the atheism versus reform thing and all of that. If it's coming up, I think it's going to spark conversations in all kinds of communities. But I do agree with I think that part was especially striking when Sam talked about how he said we're at war with Islam, and I wonder about that. So this is what I guess I'm getting at, is that there are, when you say things like that, even though they're true, right? Even though a lot of you do believe them, or I do believe them, I think it's very, very easy to gain Twitter followers. The only thing is you're always going to gain Twitter followers in the way the Fox News gains viewers, in that you're only going to get people who agree with you, and there's an illusion that everybody's talking about this, but it's not really like that. It's just a very, very big echo chamber, and you're not really reaching out and reaching other people. So I think that it is important. If we keep on talking about the regressive left, and we start complaining about it, it feels very good to have a little circle jerk where everyone's complaining about the regressive left or whatever, but if it's not going outside of that circle jerk, they just kind of ignore you, and you stay within your circle. So I guess this is a question that when we talk about truth, when people say things that are true, that apply, does it matter who's saying them? So we've had, Armin and I have talked about this a lot, right? So for instance, if I have a legitimate criticism about Israeli policy, Israeli, like the Netanyahu, the Likud government, and what they're doing, I don't like what they're doing in the Palestinian territories. And the same criticism comes from, I guess, a neo-Nazi who wants to see Israel wiped off the face of the earth. That's not something I want, but that's something they want. But they're making a similar criticism. Does it matter where it's coming from? If you're gonna, let me give another example of this. I don't know who it was that tweeted that quote, that if you want to know who rules over you, find out who you're not allowed to criticize, right? So that is a quote that's attributed to Voltaire.
Misattributed to Voltaire.
Misattributed to Voltaire, but it's actually by a guy named Kevin Alfred Storm, who was a noted white supremacist, and he was talking about the Jews, right?
Wow.
So sometimes things like this happen, and you have people who are very bad people say very truthful things. You see a lot of far right anti-Muslim bigots come out and say, make the same criticisms about Islam that I would make, or that Armin would make, or that even Maajid might make. But does it matter who is saying them? And should we be mindful of that, and mindful of dissociating ourselves from them, even if it may be true? Do intentions matter?
Gosh, I'm tempted to bring in, I love her, Amy Chua's book, Political Tribes, and some of her.
Yeah.
Because it's political. So, I want to answer it that it does, especially if you're trying to be effective with communication. So I think we often want to live in a world, or think we live in a world, of just a war of ideas, and I think that's like the line that we are at war with Islam, where that and using that hypothesis of that explaining the world falls, I think, far shorter than a much more depressing starting point that someone like Amy uses in her book. She wouldn't phrase it this way, but that basically we're barely evolved monkeys who just kind of are really tribal and hate people who don't look like us on some basic level. If you start with that sort of like premise, then okay, my last name's Shapiro and I'm Jewish. Does it matter if I'm the one, or I was raised in a Jewish household, I don't really use that identifier, but does it matter if I'm the one that criticizes Israel versus you, this brown guy with the name Ali Rizvi?
If you're Max Blumenthal, then Max Blumenthal from...
I certainly...
Let him answer.
Yeah, but go ahead.
But it's and this is something that Sam was also aware of in that article that you like, that I really appreciate you giving some love to. I quote Sam. It was 2007 in a very lively and nasty debate with Reza Aslan. And I quote this paragraph that I reference all the time, where he says almost exactly what you just said. He said, gosh, I'll get the paragraph wrong here, but he says, you are better positioned. I'm not going to change Muslims' minds. Basically, you are better positioned to do that. That's your job. And he ends it by saying, drawing cartoons of the Prophet and writing paragraphs of the kind that I have is not a strategy. I am not a diplomat. And I branch off that, and to his credit, I think this book and this film is his effort to try to at least understand what it feels like to be a diplomat, which led to a much later, I guess, 9 years later, writing this failed blog post of a speech that he wished Hillary Clinton would read, which is explicitly, obviously, trying to be a diplomat, literally just trying to write a speech for a diplomat.
Yeah. But he wanted to be, to Armin's point, he did it truthfully. He didn't. There was nothing in that thing that was a lie. But he certainly tried. I mean, I would argue that he tried to do it also politically, and he was using the words. Whether again you agree with him or not, he was convinced by Maajid's at least political tactic, and he was using. If you read the speech, it's all Islamism. It's not saying we are at war with Islam and we need to defeat it or something like that. It was much more nuanced political language. Even if you think that's what he meant or wanted her to say ultimately in some philosophical world, it would not be a useful political speech. So to answer your question, it matters because we're humans and we come just with a billion years of baggage of evolution that gear us to be biased towards our own tribes, no matter how enlightened we want to be. I think most people are subjected to that, and it's unfortunately helpful of who is saying what. The fact that Maajid can say something similar to Sam, and Maajid has a funny name and brown skin, unfortunately matters politically, not because of those first two bubbles, but because of the psychological one, and because of this tendency we have to follow. And he's a liberal too. Like that's the thing. Like if
tribes are just as big, which is of course what her book is about.
Right. Yeah. But because my whole idea is like I would love to be like so I'm one of those, to Armin's point, if I am going to say anything diplomatic, if I am going to do something, try to think about what's going to be effective and how to talk about it. I'm going to try. I'm not going to water down what the idea is. I mean, I tried to do that in my book too. I tried to be to speak in a way that what you mentioned earlier. Is, if I was younger, how would I like to be spoken to when I was in that mindset? What would I find compelling and convincing? So I tried to do it that way, but I don't want to be speaking the truth and feeling very happy about speaking the truth if I'm just talking to myself, right, the whole time. And if it's not getting out there, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop speaking the truth. But I do want to be careful about how I choose to say things, to the extent that it goes beyond whatever the audience is that my echo chamber is. I would, my wife would disagree with me in a lot of ways. My wife is a completely different animal. She's more like, she's similar to Armin in that way, in that they're sort of truth absolutists in a way, where I guess we're all truth absolutists. That's a terrible term. I take that back. Yeah, but her thing
truth
was
absolutists as opposed to what?
No, but the thing that changed her mind was when she was in university, and she was one of those, I'm spiritual but not religious. I'm sort of, I believe in secularism, but I'm not fundamental, but I still believe in a spiritual whatever. She had that, and then one of her friends was having a late night discussion with her, and then he just said, he's like, really, that's just stupid. And he said something like that, and he kind of derided the way she was thinking, and that really pissed her off. And then she went back and she thought about it, and she said she found that very effective. And I know that Armin knows this too. We get messages from people all the time who were really pissed off by what we said, and then later they're like, well, now I see. So that approach does work. But
I'm not
don't think it's the only one.
Not telling the truth, like in any of this podcast. I just think, if there's, like you said, it's people are uncreative if they think they can't tell the truth effectively. They're being uncreative. If you're telling the truth intentionally to provoke someone, Maybe it could be effective. It's a strategy, I suppose. I mean, I'm hearing that, like you said, with Armin, and
No.
Hitchens famously, like sort of announced that was his technique often. But yeah, just keeping your goal in mind and trying to hit it.
Only provoke people with things that shouldn't be provoking.
But can Armin, can I say something? I think the one thing that we're doing here when we're talking about this is we're assuming that Maajid is somehow not telling the truth.
Yeah, Maajid believes.
No, that's what I'm saying. The political and the philosophical positions are the same. Because if the people think some method works, that the disagreement is on the delivery method, not on the fact that we have to say the truth. No, I'm just saying that. I'm just saying I'm not making the assumption that Maajid is lying to people, is purposefully lying to people. I'm talking about the atheists that think that what he's saying is not true. But support it anyways because they think it works.
No. But what I'm saying is, here's what I'm saying. I'm moving to something. No, I'm moving to something else. I'm saying that, for instance, like even the beginning of the thing, when Sam challenged Maajid at the dinner, Maajid was like, "What are you calling me a liar?" Right? Yeah. And I think he was completely sincere when he said that. So Maajid says he's a believing Muslim. So if he's a believing Muslim, then when he's talking about reform, and he's talking about sort of changing things and reinterpreting scripture, the way the gymnastics and everything that he talked about, all of that, he's trying to find a way that's effective to take what he believes, what he says that he believes, and to be the truth. So, so he saying it in a way that may be effective to somebody or compelling to somebody who's in his position when he was younger, as you said. So. We may think that, the whole reform thing is a bullshit, substituting bullshit for more bullshit. But from his perspective, he's doing exactly what we're saying. Like he's just trying to say whatever he thinks is the truth. He's trying to say it in a way that would also be effective, right?
Yeah, so we call what other people think is truth. If you disagree with it, you think it's bullshit, and you call it out as bullshit. Simple as that.
Yeah, so that was right. Anyway, let's not go back. Can I back into that? Let's
I want to go back to the movie a little bit. So, one thing I disagreed. Like I keep mentioning Maajid, but I want to also mention something I disagreed with Sam on, and then ask you what are the things that you disagree with on Sam on. And Ali, at some point we need to get to the Patreon questions in the live chat. So you're muted, Ali. So one thing that
we'll do that in 15 minutes.
Okay, so one thing that Sam mentioned is this whole Islam versus Islamism, which I really dislike because apparently the difference is that Islamism is political and Islam isn't. I don't understand at what point or Islamism is supposed to be like taking over the world and everything. If you understand Islam, then you realize that, well, yeah, everything you're talking about Islamism is Islam. Everything you're talking about jihadism is also Islam. The difference are the people, not the ideology. It's interesting that they mention in the movie, for example, that we need to talk about the people separately from the ideas. But then what they do is then talk about the ideas, and they put the Islam and Islamism and jihadism, the ideas in separate categories. But the idea of Islam has all the attributes that they gave to Islamism and also to jihadism. I don't understand why. I mean, anybody that studies the Quran and the Hadith will be able to tell you that. But I don't know. So what do you? And yeah. But after you respond to that, also let me know what are the stuff that you mentioned you disagreed with Sam on some things. So you might bring that up.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's best understood the Islamism, jihadism, this concentric circle part of the film where Maajid breaks it into these parts as just legal definitional terms. So literally I'm talking about, he also, has a legal mind and studied it. So think about it just as trying to find out labels for descriptors of people's behavior and people's beliefs. Like, I'll leave the Islam aside for a second. It's as legal as, okay, killing is a thing, and murder is a specific kind of killing, and second-degree murder is a more specific kind of killing, and manslaughter. and the lines between them can get very fuzzy, but generally saying, first degree murder and manslaughter are two different kinds of killing. I'm just giving you these are just legal definitional terms.
I agree with those lines when it comes to people. No, I agree. Yeah, I don't want. I just.
What do you mean with people? I'm still just saying like behaviors of people. Like second degree killing is a behavior. Yeah, and you're describing the behavior, and you're assigning a symbol to it that also has something in common, whatever variables it is, with someone else who does the same behavior.
Right. I agree with those lines when it comes to people. I don't agree with those lines when it comes to the ideology. Right. So the problem is that you like those circles. They all make sense.
I mean, I'll get to it if you think it breaks down with Islam generally, because I know the argument you're making. But just if you stay with, and I'll tell you where I think it breaks down, which is slightly different. But okay, yeah. I mean, his definitions for people who don't know them, or you'll see them in the film, is Islamism is the desire to impose any given interpretation of Islam over society, where jihadism is the acting out of Islamism in violent means, basically. And then there's the circle outside of it of conservative Muslims who maybe hold these conservative values but don't desire to impose it on society at large. I think that's where it breaks down a little bit. And then, of course, reform and liberal-minded Muslims on the outside who just don't take any of it seriously, wherever that is. I mean, if you think there's no difference between, okay, I mean, I think you're making just an ideological challenge to the entire thing of saying it's impossible to be a Muslim without being an Islamist.
No, okay. I'm not saying that at all. Of course, it can be a Muslim without being without. Okay, because the thing
you're making a distinction between Islam and Muslims. You're saying that
the thing is,
if Islam's just a big sloppy, floppy term that encompasses all of it and can point even as something.
Muslim is a big floppy term that encompasses all of it. Islam is very clear and direct. It's Quran and Muhammad and Allah, okay, and the Hadith and the Sunnah, right? That's very clear. What I agree with those whole circles and the Muslims being the way I separated instead of.
Can I stop you right there, because I want to ask you then a word, because if you want to use that definition of Islam, fine. But what word should I use to describe the mishmash of a history and religion and art and common culture give me a word for that. If it's not Islam, just give me a word.
No.
That's a good question.
Well, here I have an answer, because now you're talking about people and people's behavior, right? And the way
I'm still okay. I'm not. I'm really talking about a culture. I'm looking for a word like American or something like that. Just give me a word that works as American isn't a people. This is an idea. It's a myth. Give me a myth that ties it together, that somehow puts all of the. If I'm trying to just have a efficient word that points to the.
Islam is the word, but what I'm saying is that all these mishmash of different ideologies, they're very different.
Even just like behaviors.
The only thing they have the only thing that. The word that we use, if we're going to put all of them into one category, should be based on the only thing that all of them share and nothing else, right? And the only thing that all of them share is Muhammad as the prophet of God, Quran as the direct word of God, and Allah as the only God. That's the only thing they share.
Okay.
And
so could you hold those three beliefs and those tenets and be in? Do you think it's impossible to be in the conservative circle that Maajid draws and not be an Islamist?
But no, I think you could. Okay, so here's the thing: you could be a Muslim that doesn't follow Islam.
Okay.
Right? Because Muslim definition of a Muslim is based on belief, not based on behavior. Right? If you say the Shahadat, if you believe in Allah and Muhammad and the Quran as the direct word of God,
we disagree on this, Amr.
I know.
We've talked about it before.
Yeah,
we disagree on this. Yeah.
No, this is the definition of based on Islam, based on 99% of Muslims.
I know. I'm just saying we disagree. We disagree on it.
No, but here
I think that. Go ahead.
The way I categorize people, right, is the people that are true to Islam and follow Islam, and Muslims that ignore Islam and don't follow Islam, who are still Muslim. And the category of the circles makes sense to me, and I agree that there's different lines, right? But the thing is that most Muslims are better than too good to follow Islam. This is the way I categorize it. We have. I think that's a separate conversation.
This is
the this is a question that is being asked here. The categorization is nominal Muslims are people that are Muslim only by name, only based on agreeing with they don't live a life that is according to Islam, or they care about living living to Islam. Those are nominal Muslims. And then you have minimalist Muslims, and these are Muslims that do the bare minimum that is required by Islam. They fast, they pray, and that's about it. They do nothing else. It's just like brushing teeth for them, right? And then you have the followers of Islam, that the people that actually try to figure out what is Islamic teaching and abide by it. And then you have the really serious Muslims that I don't know, could be called Islamic scholars and something, like very conservative Muslims that make their Islam is their whole life. So again, the circles for me is not about is about how true you are, and this is not just about Islam. It's also Christianity works the same way, right? You have nominal.
This is the model that Sam used to use. It was literally just like a gradient. He used to use this of just like black on here and white on here, and you've got shades of gray in the middle, and it was just degrees of belief, and you go further down one side, and you end up in jihadism, and you go further
in behavior, because you could really believe. And I know this is illogical, but guess what? A lot of people are very logical. Just like a lot of not just Muslims, a lot for people don't live based on their philosophy.
Okay.
You could truly believe that this is the word of God and never fucking read it, right? So you could really, really believe that.
If I complicate it a little bit of like I think that's the model you're building of just like degrees of adherence, and that's you go further down this line, and that's Islam over here, and just like barely Islam over here. If I complicate it somehow, I don't even know like how this would happen, but if somebody just believes a tiny little sliver of it, but it happens to be the part that should be imposed upon society, would it be fair to call this person an Islamist, even though they ignore most of it, but they think everyone ought to live under this, even if it's just like the hijab or something, and they equate this to the thing, and they think everyone ought to wear that, and they want that imposed upon everyone? This would be by definition, just by behavior again, it would fall in the category. If that was in court as a crime, it would be like, oh, like you're committing the act of Islamism using Maajid's definition. But doesn't that complicate a little bit of your like just general belief and adherence? It's almost
I'm not saying they're not Muslim. Oh, sorry, go.
I know he's trying to pluck out a specific narrow behavior of any given interpretation, blah blah blah, but over society, and that it's really just theocracy by a different name. Or by a specific name here. Doesn't that, I don't know if that puts pressure on just trying to...
Are you talking about a person that believes the Quran is the word of God or not?
I mean, even if I don't even care. No, it doesn't. I think what I'm trying to say, if you believe in an interpretation of it that says I don't even know if it's possible or whatever, but you think it's impossible.
You don't have to be Muslim to be a theocrat or an asshole.
But what if you are... Okay, but honestly, Islamism is just is a Muslim theocrat, however narrow that could be, and maybe it's someone who just doesn't.
So here's
what I'm saying.
Islam
if you want to live according to Islam, you have to be an Islamist.
I totally hear your argument there.
Here's what I think. I think that I was going to say, you kind of brought up anyway, Jay, is when you said fundamentalist theocrat. So I'm going to tell you another story from my workplace, and that's usually my barometer, because those people, they're not really, I mean, they're amazing people, super smart people, but they're not necessarily in this kind of discussion and checking as tuned into it as we are. So one of them actually, one of my friends had to watch something on TV where they talked about Islam and Islamism, and she came up to me and she's like, I just got to ask you this, they were talking about Islam and they were talking about Islamism. What is the, is there a difference? What is it the same thing? And it completely flew over her head. She didn't understand because the difference in it was so subtle and it wasn't actually recognizable. So when you say, for example, a Christian theocrat, I am a big supporter, or I'm a big proponent of using terms that have parallels in, for example, Christianity. So, when we talk about the Muslim secular movement, instead of talking about like atheists and all this stuff in the Muslim world, just talk about the Muslim Enlightenment. And that's like, because people recognize it because there's a parallel with the Christian Enlightenment. So if we came up with terms for somebody what is somebody who wants to spread Christianity and impose it in a political way across other people, you'd say maybe you'd call it political Christianity. You'd call it Christian
used the word crusader in the film in an analogy.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that
Christianity
that
is
may
not
be,
political by nature. There's a difference.
But
no, of course it's political by nature. It is
we're
political
talking
by
about-
nature.
Okay, the Old Testament maybe is political by nature.
No. Even the New Testament is. Anytime you're trying to use the threat of the afterlife and everything to lay down the law and
It's
to
a
get
good
people to behave in
weapon
a
to be
certain way.
used as politics, but I mean, it's less political than Islam. Can you agree with that?
I don't see a difference. No. I actually don't. I think it's less political in in Islam. It's less statesmanly than Islam. It's less
Come on,
sort of
Ali.
state-based, but
If
it's
Christianity is the religion that you follow the way of Jesus, and if Islam is the religion that you follow the way of Muhammad, Jesus never got to rule, and Muhammad did rule.
First of all, Jesus not only did he endorse the Old Testament, but he
I
used the
understand
threat.
that, but
Hold on,
Yeah.
Armin, hold on. He used the threat of eternal reward and punishment to get people to submit to what he wanted them to do, and he used the threat of eternal punishment to get them to manipulate their behavior.
We're drifting off of.
Yeah,
We are
I'm not defending
drifting off.
Christianity. By the way, I'm not defending Christianity, but go on.
Of course,
No,
you're not,
but you could, because again, just behavior-wise, you could draw the same four circles for Christianity. The size of them would be different. That's just what we're talking about.
Yeah,
If you think you can't find a Christianist, I'm making up a word here to try to do the parallel thing, just behavior-wise, Armin, who said, like, there's an idea in the New Testament, and it says that, gay people are sinners, and we have to or let's do the Old Testament, fine, or what? I mean, I don't even know if it's in the New Testament, but there's a punishment for homosexuality, and I'm reading it here, and it's my interpretation, and that ought to be imposed upon society, and I'm going to do that, and that would be a Christianist.
That's in the New Testament too.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that
I'm just talking about, again, like you're shifting it to the ideology. This is behaviors of people. If you go back to my just sort of like legal definitions of killing is a vague term, and there are specific kinds that are only defined by the variables of the behavior of the people exhibiting it. You're shifting it to sort of the like authenticity of their behaviors.
Armin, I just want to get back because we got.
Okay, no, I have to respond to this. Sorry. First of all, I am consistent when a Christian fights for gay rights, when a Christian fights for secularism, when a Christian fights for women rights or whatever, I say that this is not Christianity. I give credit to the Christian, not to Christianity. I say this is against Christianity. I'm consistent.
No one's giving credit to again. You're shifting it to the.
No, but I'm also not saying that the Muslims are not being authentic, because what I think is happening is that we're reducing to Muslims and nothing else. They are being authentic. They're just not being authentic to Islam. They're being authentic to better views. They're competing ideas in their head, and they're being authentic to better ideas.
Guys, I'm just going to step in because I feel like just for the audience, we're going in circles now, and we're getting repetitive. So that's why I wanted to get back to what you were saying. Another thing that you said, for example, when we were talking about parallel terms, is you said Christianism, right? So, you're like supposing there's a word like Christians, but there isn't. And when you say, Christianist, a lot of people won't understand what that means. If you say, well, there are Christians and then there's Christianism. And, there's another word for it, like Christendom is something that was used, Christendom in the past. That's a little bit more familiar, but the nuances in that.
Crusader. I don't know.
Yeah, but purely from a messaging standpoint, I think those terms are hard, and that's why I think that the Islamism thing is very confusing to the general person.
But Jay never answered my question, by the way. I asked him what did you disagree with Sam on?
We'll get to that.
But Ali, just to throw in, it'll be really quick. The line that Maajid uses that I think is super effective with exactly what you're talking about. It's actually in the trailer too, where he says, just like the Christians have their Bible belt, we Muslims have our own Quran belt. I think that's super effective.
See, like that is effective.
Yes.
Quran belt, political Islam, Muslim theocrat, right?
The circles are a different size.
Seder. Those are. So these are. If we use terms like this, then it is something that will be much more, sort of much clearer to people who may not be able to.
At its best.
Because Islamism, you have to think about it too cerebrally.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're going to get to patron questions.
No, answer first my question. I asked him, what did
you disagree with, Sam? Yeah.
With Sam? Oh, okay. Yeah, it almost goes back to the Amy Chua point. He talks about, it's later in the film, and he's made this point a lot. He talks about the common, let's say liberal, I know where these terms are getting flimsy, but the liberal challenge that everything can sort of be pinned on terrestrial grievances, and that's really what this is all about, and it's all blowback. and he goes through that you can play that game, and he actually points briefly to the Palestinians. He says you can play that game more or less effectively depending on who you're looking at. And he says the Palestinians who have been victimized in many ways, and then quickly shifts to this point of saying that there are endless pure cases where somebody has suffered no grievance and has been afforded everything in the world and still finds the ideas in the Quran and Hadith captivating enough to go join something like ISIS or whatnot. I think, of course, like that's true, but the challenge here is I think it's an incomplete analysis and maybe doesn't layer in enough of the psychological mindset of how identity actually really works. Because the challenge would be, are there actually such things as pure cases? To identify with a group is a very complex, big thing. You as an individual might identify as a Jew or a Christian, or even like I'm an Eagles fan and I'm an NFL fan, like I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and that's some sort of identity that means something to me. And maybe I've suffered no particular grievance, but I align my identity in a way that's larger than myself, and I internalize or feel the grievance of some other portion of my larger group that is suffering, and react upon that kind of violence. And it doesn't even need to be someone who's alive. You can find Jews who've been afforded everything in the entire world, but somehow align their identity with the victims of the Holocaust and internalize that and become rather extreme Jews or this or that. Like identity is a really complex thing. One thing, and then we could go to the questions also, is I think a lot of times in these kind of conversations we rightfully totally trash identity politics, which we should if you define it correctly, and we could try to do that. But we too often throw away identity along with identity politics. And identity, and this is all of what Amy's book's about, I can't stop preaching it. Identity is an incredibly powerful force in psychology, and also can be an incredibly powerful force for meaning in life, and totally amazing, even secular meaning. But identity often gets sort of, dumped into the garbage bin when you throw away identity politics. I think Sam's analysis at times talking about the religious motivations or pure ideological motivations for violence or terrorism or illiberalism is a bit incomplete there. But I'm
not even ready to throw away identity politics entirely. I think the times that identity politics makes sense is when your identity is being used as a way to target you, right? Like, like if I'm living in Nazi Germany and you come at my door and we're like, hey, I'm a Jew, can you please hide me? Of course, there's a difference between you being a Jew and somebody else. Like if a helicopter is landing in ISIS area and there are people trying to get the helicopter, I'm pretty sure I'm going to give preference to Yazidi women than everybody else. Like if your identity is a target on your back, then identity politics makes sense. If you're a legitimate victim,
being pulled over by a cop. Right?
It's like I said, if like defined in the most like obvious, crappy, maybe SJW way, like maybe we all agree it's a problem. John Haidt's been talking about this also recently in a nice way of sort of like good identity politics versus the more nefarious kind.
The bad part of it has been used. Okay, the good identity politics is like, hey, my identity is being used against me. Please help me. That's good. The bad identity politics is like, hey, because I need advantages because of my identity, or you because of your identity, your opinion's illegitimate, or you can't talk about this thing. All that kind of stuff obviously is just racism by rebrand. Yeah, totally. Okay, cool.
And I just want to mention that we did have an episode. We had a really good discussion on this with Sarah Hayder. That was like earlier in the year. So if you guys want to check that out, go and check it out. So, in any case, I'm going to go through the questions. It's not going to be in any particular order. Renzo is saying he had a comment. He said religion is inherently political. Most religions include ideas about how to govern society and are used to legitimize political regimes. And I agree with that. I think that some religions are more dangerous than others because to the extent because of the content of what they're saying. But I think when it comes to the political aspects of them, I think that the Abrahamic religions are very, very similar. I think they're comparable.
I think if the Viking religion was still around, that would be the most dangerous one.
It would. Yeah, all of them.
Yeah.
Greek mythology.
I mean, in Islam, it's benefits, like you get the best part of heaven if you die in war, but in Viking ideology, the only way to go to heaven apparently is to die in war. Like that's pretty a little bit more extreme than Islam. To Valhalla, not heaven. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is a really good question from Jim King, and this is Jay. Let's see if you can take this one. Is there a concept from the Nawaz and Harris conversation that you feel you nailed in the film? And is there one concept that you felt you did not nail as well as you would have liked? Oh, sorry, that wasn't the question. There's another question, but this is a pretty good one too. Something, that you nailed in the film, and one other one that you felt you did not nail as well.
Yeah, that is a good question. Yeah, I don't know if I nailed anything. It's like it's really, I'm so close to it. I have no idea. I think time will tell because it is trying to be an effective piece of communication. So the proof will be in the response if I've really nailed anything. I think I most we did. I know Armin disagrees with it, but we repeated the Islamism term because it's so central to what Maajid's trying to do, love him or hate him, 3 times. So I hope we nailed that just by
love him and disagree with him at the same time. Love him.
And we all love him.
We all love him here. But we hit that literally 3 times in pretty rapid succession. So if people just get one thing, even if it's something to argue about, it would hopefully be that definition. I already mentioned, I think he was at his absolute best when he with his Quran belt and Bible belt comparison. That's sort of when he goes on this tear about ideas being worse than bombs. That's my favorite part of the film. So I hope that's nailed.
Yeah.
What we didn't nail, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot on the cutting room floor that wasn't working, so we just didn't do it all the way. I'm trying to think. Okay, definitely in the setup, because this was much longer and a lot of earlier cuts. Sam's views on religion are not so simple, and we tried to broach it a million times in a lot of different cuts. And in the end, we sort of just throw a few lines in there. In a film, we're always just, it's like a vice where you squeeze it and you lose a lot on the sides. What we come out with is a line where he says something like, I realize there's a there, and we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We don't have time to really get into the nuance of what he means by the there. It's almost, he wrote an entire chapter in Waking Up. It's like the whole intro where he uses the word spiritual in the subtitle and says, listen, I'm not going to apologize for using the word spiritual because what I'm after here cannot sort of be pointed at or lassoed by any other word that works here. That deep sense of, again, I'll just use the word as well because I can't do any better, of spirituality in deep contemplation of the reality that we're actually in is something that we just couldn't jam together in the beginning of the film without totally derailing people. And then also there's a danger because both men are so interesting without hooking people on an idea that they want so much of that we have to spend 20 minutes on it before we get back to the main conversation. So I wish, and we have to that end, we have a ton of bonus footage actually with both of you as well that we're going to share when it's out there pretty soon. We have a ton of bonus footage with Sam talking about much more of his nuanced views on religion and on philosophy and all kinds of fun stuff like philosophical zombies and all that good stuff.
I'll tell you what the place where I think that you nailed it really well. One of my favorite parts in the movie is about lobsters. No, not those lobsters.
Yeah.
But when he's in response to when Maajid's talking about the intellectual gymnastics, and he talks about how when you go into a restaurant, you order lobster, you expect lobster because words have to mean something. You can't just make them mean whatever you want. And I felt like the way that you guys presented that visually, with the menu in front of you and and the chocolate lobster and the way that
lobster in the end, yeah.
You did. I was wondering. I was like, where'd you guys find that? But whatever it was, as he was speaking, when you brought that out, it just brought up the ludicrousness of this idea that that some of the intellectual gymnastics that even sort of Maajid was hesitatingly half endorsing or, you know, partly endorsing. But I think that part of the movie was, I mean, if there was a clip that I'd like to take and just throw it out there illegally and violate your copyright,
no,
that would be.
I think we're going to share it publicly soon. Actually, it's one of the ones that we'll give out as an exclusive clip. I love that one too.
Yeah.
There,
I love the way you guys did that.
The part that I think you nailed it was the whole narrative behind going two people being so hostile to each other and thinking they're like one of them at least thinking the other one is just the other one's enemy, hating maybe even each other, going as far as some people thinking like this is going to turn into a physical fight, maybe even like I'm not sure, but some people's perception was like that, and then showing that through just simple conversation, you could still disagree and have a civil conversation about the disagreement that you have. I mean, whatever the ideas are being discussed, that's secondary. The fact that it can, I mean, you could tell people that, hey, let's have civil discussions, and that doesn't really work. But you could demonstrate to people and show people that, look, people on opposing sides could actually still disagree and be able to have a good conversation about the disagreements with each other. And I think that is where, demonstrating that is where you nailed it.
Yeah. So another really good question from Jim King, and I want to hear the answer to this too. I was actually going to ask you something like this earlier, but we got into that conversation. Did Shapiro change his mind on anything during the process from after he first read the book until after he completed the film?
Yeah, that is a good question. Gosh, I go back and forth. It's what we've been arguing about for like an hour, but it is Maajid not wasting his time, but what is the most effective intervention here? Although I think I came in pretty agnostic, and to be honest, Armin, I actually leaned your way about a level of. I've heard you say this before. I heard you hinting at it before in one of your louder answers to me tonight. But I don't want to. You know, I didn't use it in the film, but the soft bigotry of low expectations line that's become sort of a trope. There's an equivalent here of some of the kind of effort of the Reform Muslims. I know you think this as well, of like, listen, if you know the truth, just deliver the truth. Why do you think they don't deserve it? That line of argumentation is persuasive to me morally. I am trying to do the dance in the political of, you know, how do you get to that place, and maybe with a different strategy than you have. But am also completely agnostic, and obviously, and I hope all of us are rooting for Maajid in some ways, if whoever has the solution, we want it to work. So, you know, I'm still sort of like sitting back and watching that. Right. It's an interesting question. So one more thing just to add to it to answer is, because one thing that's interesting is we started filming it, because to remember the specific wording in this question, like right before Trump got elected, and then Trump got elected, and we had one more interview to do with Sam, and we sent some emails around with all of us deciding sort of what we were going to do, if we were going to even mention him or do anything with that, and we didn't. Because we were just curious to see how it would play out. And we figured this conversation is way bigger than him, and it might just be distracting to throw anything with him in there. But maybe this is depressing, but I think from the start of the film, which was like right, you know, I'm telling you, like on the precipice of the 2016 thing to where we are now, I think I've grown a little bit more cynical about the hopefulness of where we are. And about how many people are willing to join this conversation. I think there was a split. I think there was a break. If the analogy that we filmed of the tightrope, I put it at the end of that article, wondering, it certainly has narrowed, it seems, but maybe it's snapped entirely where people have just chosen sides. One maybe silver lining is that initial hypothesis that Sam was positing way back in 2001 of, if we fail to have this conversation, the far right is going to have it for us. Very few people are doubting that hypothesis at this point. That's become like prophecy. So I think that
even among a lot of liberals, I mean, they've kind of more and more have woken up to it.
And exactly. He was that line in his book was used to actually accuse him that he's actually endorsing them. Like that that was so stupid for people to
So that's played out in a certain kind of way that may have opened the door inadvertently, maybe unfortunately for a lot of people, to be open to this film and this conversation. So maybe that's the hope and that silver lining, but it's also snapped something in that political tribalism kind of conversation that we're having where they're just so distracted and so focused on a certain anti-tribe at the moment that they just won't hear this. So there you go. Yeah.
So one question from this is Ian Bellis on this is from Twitter.
I've noticed him liking my stuff, so I appreciate it.
Oh yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
There you go, Ian.
Yeah.
What do you think Sam Harris's example in this book/film means for non-believers going forward? More emphasis on our areas of agreement with liberal Muslims and less on atheism versus theism? This is one I know that Armin's going to have something to say about, but
wait,
Jay,
can you repeat that? Can you repeat that?
Yeah, repeat it again too. I think it's a really good question.
So he's saying, what do you think Sam Harris's example in this film means for non-believers going forward? Is it going to be more emphasis on our areas of agreement with liberal Muslims and less on the theism versus atheism debate?
That's a really good question. I mean, we've been talking about it all night, but this was a direct effort for Sam to attempt a political conversation. He set off at the beginning of the phone call and of the book to say, like, this is not going to be a discussion about the merits of the does God exist debate, or is the Quran the literal word of God, or any of that. He set it out to be a purely political, strategic question. There's a question that he poses directly to Maajid while sitting at the dinner table that I filmed, where he says, how do we talk about this without empowering right-wing bigotry or left-wing illiberalism? That's an explicitly political question. That's not what is true here. It's how do we talk about this? I know where Armin's going to go, and I actually agree with him. I miss the days of pure atheism debate. I don't want to go back to it specifically. I think where Sam was clashing with Jordan was a really interesting area that clearly attracted a lot of attention, and I think they missed each other there. I wish I was moderating it to a certain degree, but it was really close. I think I don't know about Sam, and I can't forecast where he's going to go with his career and what he's going to write, but I think I would like to see us get back onto the track of maybe less of the does God exist debate, but what is God and what does it mean, which is obviously sort of more along the lines of what the Peterson Harris thing that attracted so much attention was about. I think that's a deeper hole that we all should dig down. And I think Sam is swimming in those waters as well. So if that answers something, but I can't project his career.
Jim is asking if you're planning on translating the movie for into Muslim for Muslim majority countries.
We have a few offers. I don't know where it's at the moment, but we are, Orchard, our distributor, is lining up a whole bunch of translations. I hope we have everyone who wants it. And if there are people out there who want to do it, shoot an email, contact us. I'm not sure the status of all of them, but yeah, we're gonna try to do everything, obviously.
Mars is saying that he participated in the Q&A on Monday. He was there. He said he's asking about the fact that you weren't a free speech absolutist, but Mars just joined in halfway through. So I think, Mars, you did address that. Do you want to earlier, or do you want to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the question is specifically.
So
I basically repeated what I said on that stage, so it's going to be boring. Yeah.
Yeah, he says, can we have your thoughts on that point of view with regards to the subject? Yeah, we brought this up earlier in the podcast.
To rewind it. I basically did it again.
Yeah. But anyway, this has been so. Again, it's a testament to your movie. I mean, the fact that this brought up a lot of conversation. I know Armin watched it today. I went and I bought it on iTunes. I know it had the rental option. It was so
difficult. Like, I tried to get it off of your website. It wanted a U.S. address, and
oh, really?
Yeah. So then I went to Amazon, and again, U.S. I was I asked Ali I finally got it on Vimeo.
Vimeo,
yeah. Vimeo seems. I don't know. Yeah, it's on all of them. I don't know if people are having trouble.
We're gonna. Yeah, Desh actually emailed me and gives me all the links and everything, so we're going to put that's in the description. Cool. If you guys want to watch the movie, do not miss it. It's going to be brilliant. I'm going to, we're having our yearly sort of Christmas holiday, whatever you want to call it. All holidays matter, people. All holidays matter.
To people that have read all the books and followed these conversations, I think the movie is important. The reason why this movie is so important, and you think this is I already know these conversations. No, I think what was very interesting to me is what you guys decided was the most important, because I'm pretty sure there was so much that you wanted to include and you didn't include, and for me it was very interesting to see what was it that you thought that was the most important for mass consumption, right? And if our goal is to reach out a wide audience, and if you guys want to communicate with a bigger audience rather than just our own groups and internal audience, the people that we have these conversations with, I think reviewing this movie and trying to understand, thinking about why these were the points that they selected is a very effective way of you coming up with a strategy yourself.
Thanks. Yeah, I also just want to put a quick pitch into because we also have an educational distributor, Torch Films. So if you are interested in hosting a screening or panel discussions and stuff, I hope there's a good light for that. So Torch Films has like all educational. And then we also have Fan Force, which is also for screening. So like if you want to do a screening or any kind of public thing, like we're going to try to make that really easy as well. Because as you saw on this thing, it's all about an invitation to discussion. If like you can disagree with every word in the film, that's awesome. Like show it and disagree with people and have discussions, because if that matters at all, like that's what it's for.
And consider buying it as a Christmas gift for that regressive leftist that you always try to convince, and you never were successful at trying to do that.
So
this is gonna be
I mean that's what I was going to say when I was.
Am I trying to convince someone? Or?
No, I'm just saying to people that consider buying the movie as a gift for because I know everybody has that one regressive leftist that they always try to talk to and they never gets anywhere. I'm just saying consider buying this for them as a gift.
So one of the things was that what I was going to say before we got sidetracked is that when we're going for the holidays or to over Christmas, I'm going to my sister's place, and generally the whole family gets together there. It's been several years since Islam and the Future of Tolerance came out, and I got the book for people, but nobody really read it. The people in my family, a lot of them hadn't read my book until this year, right? So because people just don't like reading books, so this is sort of generally a layperson audience, and I'm going to have everybody watch the movie, because now, even though I gave them the book, I knew that nobody was going to read it, but now I'm going to put on the movie, and we're all going to get some, like, I guess, cocoa or whatever, and everyone's going to watch it, and it's a Muslim family. Yeah. I know my sister is a big fan of Maajid. She's met him, and she likes him a lot. So that's the one thing I was thinking about. When I saw this movie, I was like, wow, this is something that I can sit down with my sort of extended family and my everybody else, including kids and stuff, and they can watch this and they can see where it comes from, and that's what I think is like just fantastic about it. So I'm gonna let you know how that goes. Because they're not politicals. They don't know Amy Chua. They kind of know Sam Harris a little bit because of me. They know, but they don't know any of this stuff. So they're really good.
How kids would view it. I'm actually curious how like younger audiences might take it in. I guess there's very, very little violence in it. There's 9/11 shots, but no bodies or anything.
No, we're okay. We're talking about Muslim kids. I mean, like my nephews and nieces, they have machine guns. So you see pictures of news in Afghanistan.
Totally.
Go to school on camels and live in tents. Okay, I'm kidding. I will actually report. I would love to catch up with you after that and maybe have a conversation about that.
iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, I think Xbox or PlayStation, Hulu, I think
Vimeo.
Vimeo is a really good one. Yeah, check it out. And then later this year we'll be on the streaming stuff. But grab it now. That's great. It's doing well. Yeah.
Finally, anything planned for the next few, like promotional tours, or are you doing more interviews? I know that you mentioned the Morning Joe interview that's going to be airing on the week of the 24th, but
sometime a lot of interviews, radio stuff. Keep writing. I don't know. There'll be a lot more of this kind of stuff. So it's obviously it's and I, like everyone else in this conversation, have other interests. It's intellectually exhausting going through this one. So in a lot of ways, I got to
that's the thing.
And just let it stand on itself and wrote that article. And but I mean, hopefully we're at that point where it can do its own work. That's why I'm so excited that it's out.
That's the thing with Jay Shapiro, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this is one movie that he's done on this topic, but there are a lot of other things. I don't want to mention them unless you mention them. But you work on your documentaries, which are, by the way, just beautifully made. I mean, the visuals are. I mean, you don't just capture images; you capture moments and emotions and things that you don't just process cerebrally, but that actually really you can feel them.
Yeah.
So you work on you just all kinds of different topics that you made.
I think you were a big fan of the. I mean, it's not even out yet. I haven't even really finished it, but that I shot a short documentary in Uganda, in Western Uganda, about I mean, it's about a library in the sort of the middle of nowhere in this small village called Ibanda, and I followed a boy who was reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for a month, and sort of did a lot of really avant-garde, weird filming with him, and I leaked a little thing that was fun. That one's going to be
you sent
totally
me some footage, or I think you tweeted. Did you tweet it? Or did you just send it to? I don't know. If
leaked a little bit of stuff just to
and it was that's
or in the backyard with the guns.
Wait, is that public? Is that something we put a link to, or
I can give it to, I could link it too.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just
that one was just like a leak to.
So really people should follow you on where to get all your other documentaries.
I'm most active on Twitter. But I guess Facebook as well. I made one about a baseball team in East Africa years ago. Like it's a lot of different stuff. But I've got a few other things that are more, let's say, IDW friendly in the works.
IDW, for people who don't know, is the intellectual dark web.
I'm not a fan, but I'm using it.
Oh no, I just wanted to explain it to the audience.
So what's your Twitter handle?
When Sam Harris was on the podcast, I asked him if he prefers the Four Horsemen or the intellectual dark web. So his answer was pretty interesting. I'll get people to go and listen to that episode. Sam didn't know that. But Armin, sorry, you were saying?
It's just JAY_Shapiro.
Just went to the people interested. So go if you're interested in those other documentaries that are coming up. Go follow him on Twitter. I guess that's the main place where you will be notified. But some Moose, you joined late. We can, and this is Secular Jihad. It's not Atheist Republic, but you could. We'll post a link to it later. You can go from the beginning. But anyway, this was really great. Thank you so much, Jay.
Yeah, thank you guys.
All right. Yeah. Thanks everybody. All the patrons out there. Mars, Jim, Moose, Obaid. Obaid's on there.
Oh, Obaid.
Obaid, I know I owe you a phone call. I'm gonna get it very soon. Huh?
Obaid and I hung out in Harvard recently.
Obaid is like one of my favorite people.
Yeah,
I know, and he's one of my wife's favorite people. Like, just I don't know why he's. Anyway, I'm not gonna. That's personal stuff. But in any case, Renzo.
What's that thing?
Huh?
Somebody, Alex. I can't read his name.
Yeah.
Alex. Everybody in the live chat, thank you so much for being a patron. Thank you so much for making all this possible. We appreciate you. And again, sorry for announcing these events very last minute. At some point I'm going to try to announce them a little bit like a day or two ahead of time, but right now we're not going to get it, but at some point we're going to do that. But thank you. Mike, live long and prosper. Love you guys and see you again soon. Bye.
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 Stay